A poor single father meets a beautiful billionaire on a blind date, but when she reveals horrific burn scars on her body, he faces a choice: run away like everyone else, or stay with the woman the world has rejected. This is the story of two wounded souls finding each other in the darkness and discovering that true love doesn't come from perfection, but from accepting each other's broken pieces. Follow my story to the end, hit like, and comment the city you're viewing from so I know how far this story has come. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and wet pavement. Daniel Hayes sat in the corner booth, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes, wondering why the hell he'd agreed to this. "It'll be good for you," Marcus had said, practically shoving him out the door that morning. "You can't spend the rest of your life alone, man. Emma needs to see her dad happy." Emma. The thought of his daughter made his chest tighten. She was 7 now, all gap-toothed smiles and scraped knees, and she deserved better than a father who came home covered in drywall dust every night, too tired to do anything but microwave leftovers and fall asleep on the couch. The door chimed. Daniel looked up. She was striking. That was the first thing he noticed. Tall, dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, wearing a charcoal coat that probably cost more than his truck. She moved through the cafe like she owned it, her gaze scanning the room with the kind of precision that made Daniel sit up straighter without meaning to. Their eyes met. She hesitated, just for a second, then walked toward him. "Daniel?" Her voice was controlled, almost careful. "Yeah." He stood, suddenly aware of the paint stain on his jeans. "Victoria?" She nodded, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. They sat. The silence stretched between them like a rope pulled taut. Daniel had been on exactly 2 dates since Emma's mother left, and both had been disasters. He had no idea what to say to a woman like this, a woman Marcus had described as successful and a little intense, which Daniel now realized was code for way out of your league. "So," Victoria said, folding her hands on the table, "Marcus tells me you work in construction." "Yeah, residential mostly, drywall, framing, whatever pays." He paused. "He said you're in business?" A slight smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Something like that." Another silence. Daniel watched her, trying to read the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped against her coffee cup like she was counting seconds. "Look," she said suddenly, "I'm not good at small talk, so I'm just going to say this up front." Daniel blinked. "Okay." Victoria took a breath, and for the first time since she'd walked in, he saw something crack in that polished exterior, something raw and unguarded. "I have scars," she said, "severe ones, from a fire. Most people don't make it past the first date once they see them, so if you'd rather leave now, I won't be offended." Daniel stared at her, not because of what she'd said, but because of how she'd said it, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized years ago, delivering bad news to someone who wouldn't care enough to stay. "Why would I leave?" he asked. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to determine whether he was mocking her. "Because most people do." "I'm not most people." "You don't know that yet." Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms. "Try me." For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then slowly, she reached up and unbuttoned the top of her coat. Beneath it, she wore a black turtleneck, and as she pulled the collar down just slightly, Daniel saw the edges of what she'd been talking about. Mottled skin, shiny and uneven, climbing up the side of her neck. She watched his face, waiting for the flinch, the polite excuse, the sudden need to be anywhere else. Daniel didn't move. "That's it?" he said. Victoria blinked. "What do you mean, that's it?" "I mean, you made it sound like you were about to reveal you were secretly a serial killer or something." He shrugged. "You got hurt. People get hurt." Her jaw tightened. "It's not just my neck." "Okay." "The scars cover most of my torso, my arms, part of my face when I'm not wearing makeup." "Okay." "You're not—" She stopped, frustration flashing across her features. "Why aren't you reacting?" Daniel tilted his head. "What do you want me to do? Gasp? Run screaming? I've got a 7-year-old who thinks fart jokes are peak comedy and a job where I spend half my day covered in insulation fiberglass. I'm not exactly living a fairy tale either." Victoria stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You're serious," she said. Dead serious. She sat back, her expression unreadable. Then without warning, she laughed. Short, sharp, almost disbelieving. Marcus didn't tell me you were like this. Like what? Honest, Daniel shrugged. Didn't see the point in being anything else. The waitress came by and they ordered coffee for him, tea for her. The conversation shifted, became easier. Victoria told him about the fire, clinical and detached, like she was reciting a medical report. House fire, 16 years old. Parents didn't make it out. She did, barely. I'm sorry, Daniel said, and meant it. Victoria's expression didn't change. It was a long time ago. Doesn't make it easier. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her gaze, something cautious and curious at the same time. What about you? She asked. Marcus said you have a daughter. Emma. She's 7. Daniel pulled out his phone, showed her a photo, Emma grinning at the camera, missing her 2 front teeth, holding up a drawing of what might have been a dinosaur or possibly a very angry cat. Victoria's lips curved into a genuine smile. She's beautiful. She's a handful, Daniel said, but his voice was warm. Her mom left when she was 2. Haven't heard from her since. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off. He pocketed the phone. It's just been the 2 of us for a while now. Works out most of the time. Most of the time? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. There are days when I wonder if I'm screwing her up, like maybe she needs a mom. Maybe I'm not enough. Victoria's expression softened. You're still here. That's more than a lot of people can say. Yeah, well, she deserves someone who's all the way here, not just half awake and covered in sawdust. You're being too hard on yourself. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, Victoria admitted. But I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment the cafe faded away. The hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of other customers, all of it distant and unimportant. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Sure. Why'd you agree to this? The blind date, I mean. Doesn't seem like your thing. Victoria hesitated. Marcus is persistent, and I thought... She stopped, choosing her words carefully. I thought maybe it was time to stop hiding. You've been hiding? For years? She looked down at her tea. It's easier that way. No one gets close. No one gets hurt. Sounds lonely. It is. The admission came out quietly, almost reluctant. Daniel leaned forward. So why now? What changed? Victoria was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I got tired of being afraid. The words hung between them, raw and unfiltered. Daniel didn't try to fill the silence. He just waited, letting her find her way through whatever she was thinking. The scars aren't the worst part, Victoria said eventually. It's the nightmares, the panic attacks, the way I can't stand to be in a room with candles or smell smoke without feeling like I'm back there, trapped, watching everything burn. Her hands were trembling now. She gripped her cup tighter as if trying to steady herself. I've spent 16 years building this life, this company, this reputation, and none of it matters because at the end of the day, I'm still that terrified girl who couldn't save her parents. Daniel reached across the table, not touching her, just resting his hand near hers. You survived, he said. That counts for something. Does it? Victoria's eyes were bright, glassy. Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like I'm just going through the motions, pretending I'm okay when I'm not, pretending I don't wake up every night screaming. Have you talked to anyone, a therapist, or... I've tried, she laughed bitterly. They all say the same things. It takes time. You need to process your trauma. Have you considered medication? As if a pill is going to fix the fact that I watched my mother die and couldn't do anything to stop it. Daniel's throat tightened. He thought about Emma, about the nights he'd lain awake wondering if he was doing enough, if he'd ever be enough. I don't have answers for you, he said. I can't fix what happened, but I can listen, if that's what you need. Victoria looked at him, her composure finally cracking. A tear slid down her cheek and she wiped it away quickly, almost angrily. I don't even know you, she said. No, but maybe that's better. No expectations. She laughed again, softer this time. You're strange, you know that? I've been told. They stayed at the cafe for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel told her about Emma's school play, about the time she'd insisted on wearing a superhero cape to the grocery store and refused to take it off for a week. Victoria told him about her company, something vague involving investments and acquisitions, and about the penthouse she lived in that felt more like a museum than a home. "Do you ever get lonely?" Daniel asked. "All the time," Victoria said. "You?" "Yeah, but I've got Emma. That helps." "What about you, though? When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" Daniel thought about it. "Honestly? Can't remember." "That's not healthy." Says the woman who just admitted she lives in a museum. Victoria smiled despite herself. "Fair point." By the time they left the cafe, the rain had started, light and steady, turning the sidewalks slick and reflective. Daniel walked Victoria to her car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than his annual salary. "Thanks," she said, turning to face him, "for not running. Thanks for giving me a chance not to." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Can I have your number? In case I need someone to talk to who won't try to fix me." Daniel smiled. "Yeah, sure." They exchanged numbers, and Victoria got into her car. But before she closed the door, she looked up at him. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "Do you think people like us, people who are broken, do you think we get second chances?" Daniel crouched down so they were eye level. "I think we get as many chances as we're willing to take." Victoria nodded slowly, something unreadable in her expression. Then she closed the door and drove away, leaving Daniel standing in the rain, wondering what the hell had just happened and why, for the first time in years, he didn't feel quite so alone. The next few days passed in a blur. Daniel worked his usual shifts, came home to Emma's endless questions about his fancy date, and tried not to think too much about Victoria. But she lingered in his mind, her voice, her honesty, the way she'd looked at him like she was waiting for him to disappoint her. On the third day, his phone buzzed. "Victoria, is this too forward?" Daniel stared at the message, then typed back. "Daniel, depends on what you're asking." Victoria, "Coffee again? Tomorrow?" Daniel, "Sure. Same place?" Victoria, "Actually, I was thinking somewhere quieter. I'll send you the address." The address she sent was for a small bookstore cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and cinnamon. Daniel arrived early, browsing the shelves while he waited. When Victoria walked in, she looked different, less polished, more uncertain. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back. "Hey," Daniel said. "Hey." She glanced around, then at him. "Is this weird? This feels weird." "Little bit," Daniel admitted, "but I'm okay with weird." They got coffee and found a corner table tucked between the mystery and romance sections. For a while they talked about nothing important, books they'd read, movies they'd seen, but eventually the conversation drifted back to heavier territory. "I haven't been sleeping," Victoria said quietly. "Since we talked, I keep thinking about what you said, about second chances." "What about it?" "I don't know if I believe it, that I deserve one." Daniel set down his cup. "Why not?" "Because I'm still here and they're not. My parents, they died and I lived, and I don't know how to reconcile that." "You think you should have died instead?" Victoria flinched. "No, maybe, I don't know." "That's survivor's guilt talking," Daniel said. "It's not rational." "I know that." Her voice rose slightly, then fell again. "I know it's not rational, but knowing doesn't make it stop." Daniel reached across the table, and this time he did touch her, just his fingers brushing hers. "You can't logic your way out of grief. Believe me, I've tried." "With your ex?" "With everything." He pulled back, leaning against the chair. "When Emma's mom left, I spent months trying to figure out what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. It took me a long time to realize that some people just leave, and it's not always your fault." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "Do you still love her?" "No." The answer came easily. "I don't think I ever really did. We were young, stupid. She got pregnant and we tried to make it work, but we were never going to last." "Do you regret it? Having Emma?" "Not for a second." Daniel's voice was firm. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me, even on the hard days." Victoria's expression softened. You're a good father. I try. That's more than most people do. They stayed at the cafe until closing, and when they left, the air was crisp and cold. Daniel walked Victoria to her car again, but this time she didn't get in right away. Can I tell you something? She said. Yeah. I haven't let anyone see me, really see me, in years. Not like this. Like what? Without the armor. She gestured vaguely at herself. The business suits, the makeup, the walls I put up. I've been pretending for so long that I forgot what it feels like to just be. Daniel didn't say anything. He just waited. You scare me, Victoria admitted, because you don't want anything from me. You're not trying to fix me or save me or use me, and I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything, Daniel said. Just be honest. That's all I'm asking. Victoria nodded, her eyes searching his. Then impulsively, she stepped forward and hugged him, brief and awkward, but genuine. Thank you, she whispered. Before Daniel could respond, she pulled away and got into her car, driving off into the night. Daniel stood there, hands in his pockets, feeling the ghost of her arms around him. Over the next week, they texted constantly. Little things, mostly. Victoria sending him pictures of her lunch, Daniel complaining about his boss. But beneath the casual banter, there was something deeper forming, something neither of them wanted to name yet. Then one night, Daniel's phone rang at 2 a.m. Hello? His voice was rough with sleep. Daniel? Victoria's voice was shaking. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called. What's wrong? Daniel sat up, fully awake now. I had a nightmare. A bad one. And I know this is pathetic, but I didn't know who else to call. It's not pathetic, Daniel said. Do you want me to come over? No, can you talk to me until I calm down? Yeah, of course. He stayed on the line for over an hour, talking about nothing and everything. He told her about Emma's latest obsession with dinosaurs, about the leak in his bathroom he couldn't seem to fix, about the time he'd accidentally locked himself out of his truck in the middle of a rainstorm. Slowly, Victoria's breathing steadied, her voice losing its frantic edge. Thank you, she said finally. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't answered. I'll always answer, Daniel said. You need me, you call. I don't care what time it is. There was a pause. Then quietly, why are you being so nice to me? Because you deserve it. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, Daniel echoed her words from their first date. But I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning. And I know what it's like when someone throws you a rope. Victoria was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I think I'm falling for you. Daniel's breath caught. Victoria, I know, it's too soon. We barely know each other. But I can't stop thinking about you, and it terrifies me because everyone I've ever cared about has left or died, and I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. You're not going to lose me, Daniel said. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere right now. Isn't that enough? Victoria let out a shaky breath. I don't know. Is it? It has to be, Daniel said. Because that's all any of us have right now. They talked for another 20 minutes before Victoria finally said she was ready to try sleeping again. After they hung up, Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he'd gotten himself into, and why, despite the complications, despite the fear, he didn't want to walk away. The following Saturday, Victoria invited him to her penthouse. Daniel almost said no. It felt like crossing some invisible line, but Emma was at a sleepover and he was curious. The building was in the heart of downtown, all glass and steel. The doorman greeted Victoria by name and gave Daniel a polite nod that didn't quite hide his curiosity. They took the elevator to the top floor, and when the doors opened directly into her apartment, Daniel's breath caught. It was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights glittering like stars. The furniture was modern and expensive, everything arranged with the precision of a magazine spread. This is where you live? Daniel said. Yeah. Victoria sounded almost apologetic. It's a bit much, I know. A bit? Daniel laughed. This place could fit my entire house, twice. Victoria led him inside, and as they moved through the space, Daniel noticed something. Despite the size, despite the luxury, it felt empty. There were no personal touches, no photos, no clutter, nothing that said someone actually lived here. You weren't kidding about the museum thing, he said. Victoria glanced around as if seeing it through his eyes. I told you. Don't you have anything, I don't know, anything that's just yours, that makes this feel like home? She hesitated, then walked to a closet and pulled out a box. Inside were photos, old, faded, some with singed edges. Her parents, her childhood home, a life that ended in flames. This is all I have left, she said quietly. Daniel looked through the photos carefully, reverently. They look happy. They were. Victoria's voice broke slightly. We were. Tell me about them. And she did. For the next hour, she talked about her father's terrible jokes, her mother's love of gardening, the way they dance in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. Daniel listened, asking questions, laughing at the right moments, offering comfort when her voice faltered. I haven't talked about them in years, Victoria said eventually. It hurt too much. Does it still hurt? Yes, but less, somehow. With you. They sat on the couch, the city lights casting shadows across the room. Daniel noticed the way Victoria's hands were shaking, the way she kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting something terrible to appear. What are you afraid of? He asked. Everything, she admitted. That you'll see how broken I really am and leave. That I'll let myself care about you and then lose you. That I'm kidding myself thinking I can have something normal. Who says I'm normal? Daniel said. I'm a 32-year-old single dad who can barely pay his bills and has commitment issues the size of Texas. We're both a mess, Victoria. The question is whether we want to be a mess together or apart. Victoria turned to face him fully. And you want what? To be together? I want to try, Daniel said. If you do. I don't know how. Neither do I. But we can figure it out. Victoria's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the catch, the inevitable disappointment. But Daniel just looked back, steady and sure. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just being. And for the first time since the fire, Victoria felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The first few weeks felt like walking on ice, beautiful, fragile, and terrifying. Daniel found himself thinking about Victoria at the strangest times. In the middle of framing a wall, his hands would go still, his mind wandering to the way she'd laughed at something he'd said, or the careful way she chose her words, like each one cost her something. Emma noticed. You're smiling weird, she said one morning, poking at her cereal with a spoon that had somehow ended up sticky despite the fact that they were eating plain Cheerios. I'm not smiling weird, Daniel said, pouring coffee into a mug that read, World's Okayest Dad, a gift from Marcus last Christmas. Yeah, you are. It's like... Emma scrunched up her face in an exaggerated expression. Like you're thinking about something funny, but you don't want anyone to know. Eat your breakfast. Is it because of the lady? The one Uncle Marcus set you up with? Daniel paused mid-sip. How do you know about that? Uncle Marcus told me. He said you went on a date with a really pretty lady and didn't mess it up for once. He said that? Uh-huh. He also said she's really rich and you better not blow it. Daniel made a mental note to strangle Marcus later. It's not about money, Em. I know that, dummy. Uncle Marcus said you're too stubborn to care about money anyway. Emma tilted her head, studying him with the unsettling perceptiveness that 7-year-olds sometimes had. Do you like her? Daniel set down his coffee. Yeah, I think I do. Is she nice? She is. Then why do you look worried? Because she's broken, Daniel thought. Because I'm broken. Because we're two people who have no business trying to build something together when we can barely hold ourselves up. I'm not worried, he lied. Emma didn't look convinced, but she went back to her cereal, humming some songs she'd learned at school. Daniel watched her, feeling that familiar ache in his chest, the one that reminded him he'd do anything to protect her, even if it meant protecting her from his own bad decisions. His phone buzzed. Victoria, are you busy today? Daniel, work until 4. Why? Victoria, I want to show you something. Can you come by after? Daniel, sure. Your place? Victoria, no, I'll send you the address. The address turned out to be a community center on the south side of town, the kind of place with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes. Daniel pulled up in his truck, confused. This didn't seem like Victoria's scene. She was waiting outside wearing jeans and a plain jacket, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup, no armor, just her. "Hey," Daniel said, climbing out of the truck. "Hey." She looked nervous, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. "Thanks for coming." "What is this place?" "Come inside, I'll show you." The interior of the community center was worn but clean, the walls covered in children's artwork and faded motivational posters. Victoria led him down a hallway and into a large room filled with kids, maybe 20 of them, ranging from toddlers to teenagers. They were painting, building with blocks, reading. A few staff members moved among them, offering help and encouragement. "This is a foster care program," Victoria said quietly. "I've been funding it for about 3 years now." Daniel looked at her, surprised. "You never mentioned this." "I don't talk about it much. It's not for publicity or anything like that. I just wanted to do something that mattered." One of the staff members, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, spotted Victoria and hurried over. "Ms. Hale, we weren't expecting you today." "I know, Carol. I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced. I just wanted to show my friend around if that's okay." Carol's eyes flicked to Daniel, curious but welcoming. "Of course. You know you're always welcome here." They spent the next hour walking through the center. Victoria introduced Daniel to some of the kids, talked about the programs they offered, tutoring, art therapy, life skills classes. She was different here, softer somehow, more present. "Why foster care?" Daniel asked when they were alone again, standing near the windows overlooking the playground outside. Victoria watched the kids playing, her expression distant. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like no one wants you." "You were in foster care?" "For a while. After the fire. I was 16, almost 17. Too old for most families to want to adopt, too young to be on my own." She crossed her arms. "I got bounced around a lot. Some places were okay, some weren't." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It made me who I am." She paused. "I had this caseworker, though, Mrs. Chen. She was the only one who didn't treat me like I was damaged goods. She helped me get into college, apply for scholarships, build a life. When I made my first million, the first thing I did was try to find her, to thank her." "Did you?" Victoria's jaw tightened. She'd passed away 2 years earlier. Cancer. "Damn." "Yeah." Victoria's voice was quiet. "So I started this instead. Figured I could do for other kids what she did for me." They stood in silence for a moment, watching a little boy try to build a tower out of blocks while a toddler kept knocking it down. "You're a good person," Daniel said. Victoria shook her head. "I'm not. I'm selfish. I do this because it makes me feel less guilty about everything I have." "That's not selfish. That's human." She looked at him, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes. "Do you ever feel like you're just pretending? Like you're one bad day away from everything falling apart?" "Every single day," Daniel admitted. "How do you deal with it?" "I don't, really. I just keep moving forward, for Emma. If it was just me, I don't know if I'd have the strength." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's what I'm afraid of, that I don't have a reason strong enough to keep going." Daniel turned to face her fully. "Then find one." "It's not that simple, isn't it? You've already built all this." He gestured around the center. "You're helping kids who need it. That's a reason." "It's not enough," Victoria said, her voice breaking slightly. "I still wake up screaming. I still can't look at fire without wanting to crawl out of my skin. I still feel like I should have died with them." Daniel reached for her hand and she let him take it. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "You didn't die," he said. "You're here, and maybe that's supposed to mean something. Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to let go. There are worse things to be." Victoria laughed, but it came out wet and shaky. "You always say the right thing. How do you do that?" "I don't. I just say what I'm thinking and hope it doesn't make things worse." They left the center a little while later, Victoria quiet and withdrawn. Daniel walked her to her car, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. "Thank you," she said, "for coming. for listening, for not making me feel crazy. You're not crazy. Tell that to my therapist. Daniel smiled. Want to grab dinner? Victoria hesitated. I don't know if I'm good company right now. I'm not asking for good company. I'm just asking if you're hungry. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but nowhere fancy. I can't handle fancy right now. They ended up at a diner on the edge of town, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played country music. They ordered burgers and fries, and for a while they didn't talk about anything heavy. Just small things, easy things. Emma wants to meet you, Daniel said, dragging a fry through ketchup. Victoria froze. What? She knows I've been seeing someone. She's curious. Daniel, I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Because I don't know how to be around kids. What if I screw it up? You run a foster care center. That's different. Those kids don't expect anything from me. They're just grateful someone's paying attention. Victoria set down her burger. Your daughter is going to have expectations. She's going to wonder why her dad is spending time with some weird lady instead of finding her a normal mom. First of all, she's 7. She doesn't think like that. Second, you're not weird. I have panic attacks in public, Daniel. I can't stand crowds. I freak out if someone lights a candle. That's not normal. Normal's overrated. Victoria looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You're really okay with all of this? With me being a mess? I'm a mess too. We've established this. It's not the same. Why? Because your scars are visible and mine aren't? Daniel leaned forward. I've got plenty of damage, Victoria. It just doesn't show up on my skin. She blinked, her eyes bright. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in? Then don't think about it. Just be here. With me. Right now. Victoria took a shaky breath, then nodded. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and when they left, the sky was dark and full of stars. I should get home, Victoria said. Early meeting tomorrow. Okay. But she didn't move toward her car. She just stood there, looking at him like she was trying to memorize his face. Daniel? Yeah? I'm scared. Of what? That I'm going to fall in love with you and you're going to realize I'm not worth it. Daniel stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint scars beneath her makeup, the uncertainty in her eyes. You're already worth it, he said. You just don't see it yet. Victoria's breath hitched. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, uncertain, but Daniel responded, his hand coming up to cup the back of her neck, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not the scars, not the fear, not the 1,000 reasons why this was a bad idea. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was crying. Sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry, I don't know why. Don't apologize. I haven't done that in so long, and I didn't think... Victoria. Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. It's okay. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I should really go. Okay. This time, she did get into her car, but before she drove away, she rolled down the window. Same time next week? She asked. Daniel smiled. Yeah, same time. The following week, Daniel brought Emma. He'd warned Victoria ahead of time, given her a chance to back out, but she'd insisted she wanted to meet his daughter. So they agreed to meet at a park. Neutral ground, low pressure. Emma was vibrating with excitement the entire drive over. Is she pretty? She asked for the 3rd time. Very, Daniel said. Is she nice? I told you, yes. But, like, actually nice, or grown-up nice, where they're just pretending. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Actually nice, I promise. What if she doesn't like me? She'll like you. But what if she doesn't? Daniel pulled into the parking lot and turned to face his daughter. Em, listen to me. Victoria is nervous too. She's never done this before, and she's worried she's going to mess it up. So just be yourself, okay? That's all anyone can ask. Emma nodded solemnly. Okay. Victoria was already there, sitting on a bench near the playground. She stood when she saw them, and Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. Hey, he said. Hey. Victoria's eyes flicked to Emma, and for a second she looked utterly terrified. Victoria, this is Emma. Em, this is Victoria. Emma stared up at her with wide eyes. "You're really pretty." Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Oh, thank you. You're very pretty too." "I know. Dad says I look like my mom, but I don't remember her, so I don't know if that's true or if he's just being nice." Daniel winced. "Emma." "It's okay," Victoria said quickly. She crouched down so she was at Emma's level. "I think you look like your dad. You have his eyes." Emma beamed. "Really?" "Really." "Do you want to play with me? I brought my dinosaurs." Victoria glanced at Daniel, who just shrugged. "Sure," she said. "I'd love to." They spent the next hour on the playground, Emma narrating an elaborate story involving a T-Rex, a Triceratops, and a meteor that may or may not have been a soccer ball. Victoria played along, asking questions, making sound effects, and Daniel watched, something warm settling in his chest. When Emma ran off to the swings, Victoria sat down next to him on the bench, slightly out of breath. "She's amazing," Victoria said. "Yeah, she is. You've done a good job with her." "I've done my best." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Daniel said. "She's the only thing that's kept me sane the last 5 years." "Do you ever wish things were different, that her mom had stayed?" "Sometimes. Not because I miss her, but because Emma deserves better than what I can give her." "You're giving her love," Victoria said. "That's more than a lot of kids get." They watched Emma swing higher and higher, her laughter carrying across the playground. "She likes you," Daniel said. "How do you know?" "She's not shy. If she didn't like you, she'd ignore you." Victoria smiled. "Good to know." Emma came running back, cheeks flushed. "Can Victoria come to dinner at our house?" Daniel looked at Victoria. "You don't have to." "I'd like that," Victoria said, "if it's okay." "Please, Dad, please." Daniel sighed. "Okay, but we're ordering pizza. I'm not cooking." Emma whooped and ran back to the swings. Victoria looked at Daniel, nervous again. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "No, but I want to try." That night, they sat in Daniel's cramped living room, eating pizza straight from the box, while Emma told Victoria every single fact she knew about dinosaurs, which was apparently a lot. "And did you know that the Stegosaurus had a brain the size of a walnut? That's so small. How did it even think?" "I don't know," Victoria said, smiling. "Maybe it didn't need to think very much." "That's what I said. But my teacher said all animals think, even if their brains are small." Daniel watched them, something settling in his chest that felt dangerously close to contentment. Victoria fit here, in his messy house with his rambling daughter, in a way he hadn't expected. After Emma went to bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch, the TV playing some movie neither of them were paying attention to. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for today, for letting me be part of this." "You don't have to thank me." "I do, though. You didn't have to let me into your life, into Emma's life. But you did, and I don't take that lightly." Daniel turned to face her. "I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think you belonged here." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You didn't have to do anything. You just had to show up." She kissed him then, slow and soft, and Daniel pulled her closer, feeling her tremble against him. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." "I know," Daniel said. "Me too." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet darkness, two broken people trying to believe they could be whole together. But over the next few days, cracks started to show. Victoria's nightmares got worse. She called Daniel at all hours, her voice raw from screaming, and he'd talk her down, stay on the line until she fell asleep again. But it was taking a toll on both of them. "You need to see someone," Daniel said one night, exhausted after 3 hours on the phone. "I told you, I've tried therapy. It doesn't work." "Then try again. Find someone new." "It's not that simple, Daniel." "It is that simple. You're suffering, and you don't have to." There was a long pause. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." But Victoria couldn't or wouldn't explain. She just retreated further into herself, canceling plans, avoiding his calls. Daniel gave her space, but it felt like watching someone drown and not being able to reach them. Emma noticed. "Is Victoria okay?" she asked one morning. She's going through some stuff, Daniel said carefully. Is she still your girlfriend? I hope so. But you don't know? Daniel looked at his daughter, at her worried little face, and felt something twist in his gut. I don't know, Em. You should call her, make sure she's okay. I've tried, she's not answering. Then go see her. That's what you do when someone you love is sad. You go see them. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel drove to Victoria's building. The doorman recognized him and let him up without question. When he reached her door, he knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Victoria, it's me. Open up. Silence. I know you're in there. I can see the lights on. Finally, the door cracked open. Victoria stood there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair tangled, her eyes red and swollen. What are you doing here? She asked. Checking on you. I'm fine. You're not fine. Let me in. Daniel, please. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was a mess. Takeout containers everywhere, papers scattered across the floor, curtains drawn tight against the outside world. When was the last time you left this place? Daniel asked. I don't know, a few days? Victoria, don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't lecture me, I can't handle it right now. Daniel took a breath, trying to stay calm. I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here because I'm worried about you. Well, don't be. I'm not your responsibility. You're not a responsibility. You're someone I care about. Victoria laughed bitterly. For now, until you realize what a disaster I am and leave like everyone else. I'm not leaving. You say that now. I'm not leaving, Daniel repeated, firmer this time, no matter how hard you try to push me away. Victoria's face crumpled. Why? Why do you care so much? Because I love you, Daniel said, and I know you're scared. But I'm scared too. And we can either be scared together or we can be scared alone, and I'd rather be together. Victoria stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let you in without it destroying me. Then we'll figure it out, Daniel said. Together. She collapsed against him, sobbing, and Daniel held her, feeling her shake with the force of emotion she'd been holding back for too long. He didn't try to fix it, didn't try to make it better. He just held her and let her break. Eventually, she pulled back, wiping at her eyes. I'm sorry, I'm such a mess. Stop apologizing. I don't want to drag you down with me. You're not dragging me anywhere I don't want to go. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. You mean that? Every word. She took a shaky breath. Okay, I'll try. I'll try to let you in. That's all I'm asking. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, about the things that scared them, the things they wanted, the ways they'd been broken and were trying to heal. And when the sun came up, Victoria looked at Daniel and said, I think I'm ready. Ready for what? To stop running. From you, from this, from everything. Daniel smiled. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. But trying and actually doing were two different things, and Victoria learned that the hard way over the following weeks. She showed up more, answered calls more, made an effort to be present. But the nightmares didn't stop. If anything, they got worse, bleeding into her waking hours until she couldn't tell the difference between memory and reality. Daniel noticed the way her hands shook when she held a coffee cup, the way she'd flinch at sudden noises, the way her eyes would go distant in the middle of conversations. You're not sleeping, he said one afternoon. They were sitting in his backyard while Emma played with chalk on the driveway, drawing what appeared to be a very aggressive rainbow. I sleep, Victoria said, but her voice was flat, unconvincing. How much? Enough. Victoria. She set down her coffee, staring at the liquid like it held answers. Maybe 2 hours a night, if I'm lucky. That's not sustainable. I know. Have you thought about medication? Victoria's laugh was bitter. Yeah, I've tried everything. Sleeping pills make the nightmares worse. Anxiety meds make me feel like I'm underwater. Antidepressants turn me into a zombie. So, no, medication isn't the answer. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. Then what is? I don't know. Her voice cracked. I don't know, and that's what scares me the most. What if there is no answer? What if I'm just broken beyond repair? You're not broken. Yes, I am, and you pretending I'm not doesn't change anything. The words hung between them, sharp and painful. Daniel pulled his hand back and Victoria immediately regretted it. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean, it's fine. It's not fine. I'm taking this out on you and that's not fair. You're allowed to be angry. Not at you. You're the only good thing in my life right now, and I keep pushing you away because I'm too damaged to accept that someone actually wants to stay. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. You want to know what I think? What? I think you're so used to suffering that you don't know what to do when things are actually okay. So you sabotage it. Push people away before they can leave on their own terms. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because he was right. He was absolutely right, and she hated it. So what do I do? She asked quietly. Stop fighting it. Stop waiting for me to leave. Just be here. I am here. No, you're not. Part of you is still back in that fire, and until you deal with that, you're never going to be fully present. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to deal with it. I've tried. I've spent 16 years trying, and I'm still stuck. Then maybe it's time to try something different. Like what? Daniel hesitated. There's a grief support group that meets at the community center on Tuesday nights. I looked it up after you told me about your parents. Maybe it would help to talk to other people who've lost someone. Victoria stared at him. You want me to sit in a circle with strangers and pour my heart out? I want you to try, that's all. I can't. Why not? Because... Victoria stopped, struggling to find the words. Because if I start talking about it, really talking about it, I'm afraid I won't be able to stop. I'm afraid I'll fall apart completely. Then fall apart, Daniel said. I'll be there to help you put the pieces back together. Victoria looked at him, at the certainty in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her. You really believe that, don't you? That I can get better? I do. Why? Because I've seen you with those kids at the foster center. I've seen you with Emma. You're not as broken as you think you are, Victoria. You're just hurting, and hurt can heal. She wanted to believe him, desperately, but the fear was too strong, too deeply rooted. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I'm asking. Emma came running over then, holding up a piece of chalk. Victoria, come draw with me. Victoria wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a smile. What are we drawing? A castle with a dragon and a princess who fights the dragon herself because she doesn't need a prince. Daniel laughed. Where'd you learn that? School. Ms. Rodriguez says girls can do anything boys can do, and also dragons are cool. Miss Rodriguez is right, Victoria said, standing up. She let Emma pull her toward the driveway, and for the next hour, she focused on drawing a very fierce dragon and an even fiercer princess, trying not to think about support groups or nightmares or the weight of her own grief. But that night, alone in her penthouse, the memories came flooding back. She was 16 again, waking up to smoke, to heat, to her mother's screaming. She tried to move, but her legs wouldn't work. The ceiling was on fire, beams cracking and falling. Her father appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the flames, and he was yelling something, but she couldn't hear him over the roar of the fire. He grabbed her, pulled her toward the window, but then the floor gave way, and he was gone, just gone, swallowed by the inferno. Her mother's screaming stopped, and Victoria was falling, burning, dying. She woke up on the floor of her bedroom, gasping for air, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. Her hands were clawing at her throat, trying to breathe, trying to remember that she wasn't 16 anymore, that the fire was over, that she'd survived. But survival didn't feel like victory. It felt like punishment. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called Daniel. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. Victoria? I can't breathe. Okay, listen to me. You're having a panic attack. I need you to breathe with me, okay? In for 4 counts. Victoria tried, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. Victoria, focus on my voice. In for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slowly, agonizingly, her breathing started to even out. Daniel stayed on the line, counting, his voice steady and calm. "That's it. You're doing great. Keep breathing." "I'm sorry," Victoria gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't apologize. I told you to call. I meant it." It was the nightmare again, the fire. "I can still smell it, Daniel. I can still feel it." "I know. But you're not there. You're here, in your apartment, safe." "I don't feel safe." "I know, but you are. I promise." They stayed on the line for another 20 minutes, Daniel talking about nothing important, Emma's latest school project, the job he was working on, a stupid thing Marcus had said at lunch. Gradually, Victoria's heart rate slowed. Her hands stopped shaking. "Better?" Daniel asked. "A little." "Good. Now I want you to do something for me." "What?" "Get up, walk to the bathroom, splash some cold water on your face, then get back in bed, and I'm going to stay on the phone with you until you fall asleep." "Daniel, you don't have to." "I'm not hanging up until you do what I said." Victoria did as he asked, and when she climbed back into bed, phone pressed to her ear, she heard Daniel shifting on the other end. "You there?" he asked. "Yeah." "Good. Close your eyes." "I'm scared I'll have the nightmare again." "Then I'll be here when you wake up." Something in Victoria's chest loosened at that. She closed her eyes, listening to Daniel's breathing, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone. The next morning, Victoria made a decision. She called the community center and asked about the grief support group. The woman on the other end, Carol, the same staff member who'd greeted them during Daniel's visit, was kind and patient, explaining that the group met every Tuesday at 7, that it was open to anyone dealing with loss, and that there was no pressure to share if she wasn't ready. "We're just people helping people," Carol said. "No judgment, no expectations." Victoria agreed to come to the next meeting, then immediately regretted it. But she'd told Daniel she would try, and she was tired of breaking promises. Tuesday came too fast. Daniel offered to come with her, but Victoria said no. This was something she needed to do alone. He walked her to her car anyway, kissed her forehead, and told her he was proud of her. "I haven't done anything yet," Victoria said. "You showed up. That's more than most people do." The community center felt different at night, quieter, more intimate. Victoria found the meeting room easily enough, a small space with chairs arranged in a circle and a table with coffee and cookies that looked homemade. There were maybe 10 people there, ranging in age from early 20s to late 60s. Carol greeted her warmly, introduced her to a few people, then gently guided her to a seat. "We'll get started in a few minutes," Carol said. "No pressure to share tonight. Just listen if that's all you're comfortable with." Victoria nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The meeting started with introductions. People shared their names and, if they wanted, who they'd lost. A man in his 30s had lost his wife to cancer. A woman in her 50s had lost her son to a car accident. A younger woman, maybe Victoria's age, had lost her sister to suicide. Each story was different, but the grief was the same, raw, heavy, suffocating. When it came to Victoria's turn, she almost bolted. But then she thought about Daniel, about Emma, about the life she was trying to build, and she forced herself to speak. "I'm Victoria," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I lost my parents in a house fire 16 years ago." "Thank you for sharing, Victoria," Carol said gently. "We're glad you're here." The meeting continued, people talking about their struggles, their memories, the ways grief had changed them. Victoria listened, her chest tight, tears streaming silently down her face. At the end, a woman named Patricia, who'd lost her husband 5 years earlier, came over and squeezed Victoria's hand. "It gets easier," Patricia said. "Not better, but easier." Victoria wanted to believe her. She really did. Over the next few weeks, Victoria went to the meetings religiously. She didn't share much at first, just listened, but slowly she started opening up. She talked about her parents, about the fire, about the guilt she'd been carrying for 16 years. And something strange happened. The nightmares didn't stop, but they became less frequent. She started sleeping 3 hours a night, then 4. Her hands didn't shake as much. She could hold a conversation without feeling like she was going to shatter. Daniel noticed. "You look better," he said one evening. They were sitting on his couch. Emma asleep upstairs, some documentary about penguins playing on the TV. I feel better, Victoria admitted. The group, it's helping. I didn't think it would, but it is. I'm glad. Thank you. For pushing me to go, I wouldn't have done it on my own. Daniel pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. You did the hard part. I just pointed you in the right direction. Still, I don't know what I'd do without you. Good thing you don't have to find out. Victoria smiled, but it faded quickly. Daniel? Yeah? What if I'm always like this? What if the nightmares never fully go away? What if I'm always going to be the woman who wakes up screaming in the middle of the night? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then I'll be the guy who talks you down. Every single time. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. Victoria lifted her head to look at him. You really mean that? I really mean that. She kissed him then, slow and deep, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. When they pulled apart, Daniel's eyes were dark, his breathing uneven. Victoria, I want to stay tonight, she said, if that's okay. Emma's upstairs. I know, I don't want to go home. I don't want to be alone. Daniel searched her face, then nodded. Okay, you can take my bed. I'll sleep on the couch. Daniel, I'm not trying to be a gentleman. I'm trying to respect boundaries. If we do this, I want it to be because we're both ready, not because you're scared to be alone. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. How are you so good to me? Because you deserve it. She stayed that night, curled up in Daniel's bed that smelled like him, sawdust and aftershave, and something indefinably comforting. And for the first time in months, she slept through the night without waking up once. But the peace didn't last. A week later, Victoria got a phone call that sent everything spiraling. It was from her lawyer, informing her that someone was contesting the inheritance from the fire. A distant relative she'd never met was claiming that Victoria's parents had promised them a share of the estate, and they were taking it to court. It's baseless, the lawyer assured her, but it's going to be messy. They're going to dig into everything, the fire, the investigation, your parents' finances. It's going to bring up a lot of painful memories. Victoria hung up the phone and immediately felt the walls closing in. The fire. They were going to make her relive the fire. Talk about it in depositions, in court, in front of strangers who would pick apart the worst night of her life for money. She couldn't breathe. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. Dinner tonight? Emma wants to make you her famous spaghetti. Victoria stared at the message, her vision blurring. She couldn't do this. She couldn't drag Daniel and Emma into her mess. They deserved better than a woman who couldn't escape her past, who was about to be dragged through the legal system and publicly humiliated. She typed back. Victoria. I can't. I'm sorry. Daniel. Everything okay? Victoria. I need some space. I'll call you later. But she didn't call. She didn't answer when Daniel called her. She just turned off her phone and sat in her penthouse, staring at the city lights, feeling the darkness close in. Daniel showed up at her door that night anyway. Go away, Victoria said through the intercom. No. Daniel, please, I can't do this right now. Then let me do it for you. Open the door. I'm fine. You're not fine, and I'm not leaving until you talk to me. Victoria buzzed him up because she knew he'd just camp out in the lobby if she didn't. When he walked in, he took one look at her face and crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. What happened? He asked, and Victoria broke. She told him about the lawsuit, about the relative she'd never met, about having to relive the fire all over again in front of lawyers and judges and people who didn't care about her pain. I can't do it, she sobbed. I can't go through that again. Then don't, Daniel said. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. Settle. Give them the money, whatever it takes to make this go away. It's not about the money, it's the principle. They didn't care about my parents when they were alive. They don't get to profit from their death. Daniel pulled back, looking her in the eye. Then fight. But you don't have to fight alone. I can't ask you to be part of this. You're not asking, I'm offering. Victoria shook her head. This is going to get ugly, Daniel, really ugly. They're going to drag my name through the mud. They're going to make me out to be some gold digger who profited off her parents' death. And I can't let that touch you and Emma. So what? You're just going to shut us out? Push us away because things got hard? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protecting. I need you to trust me. I do trust you. Then act like it. Stop making decisions for me. Stop assuming I'm going to leave the second things get difficult. Victoria's hands were shaking. Everyone leaves, Daniel. Everyone. My parents, the foster families, every person I've ever let get close. Why would you be any different? Because I love you, Daniel said, his voice breaking. And I'm not going anywhere. But you have to let me in, Victoria. All the way in, not just the parts you think are acceptable. Victoria stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how. Then we'll figure it out, together, like we've been doing. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was so strong, so all-consuming that she couldn't see past it. I need time, she said, to think, to deal with this lawsuit, to figure out who I am when everything's falling apart. Daniel's jaw tightened. How much time? I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Daniel stepped back, and the distance between them felt like a chasm. Okay, take your time. But know this. I'm not going to wait forever. At some point, you have to decide whether you want this or not, whether you want me or not. I do want you. Then prove it. Stop running. He left, and Victoria collapsed on the floor, feeling like her entire world was disintegrating around her. She'd pushed him away, just like she always did, and this time she wasn't sure he'd come back. The next few days were torture. Victoria went through the motions, met with lawyers, prepared for depositions, tried to keep her company running, but inside she was hollow. She stopped going to the grief group, stopped answering calls, stopped pretending she was okay. And then, 5 days after Daniel had walked out, she got a call from Carol. Victoria? It's Carol from the community center. We missed you at group this week. I've been busy, Victoria said, her voice flat. I understand, but I wanted to check in, make sure you're okay. I'm fine. There was a pause. Victoria, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can hear in your voice that you're not fine. What's going on? And for some reason, that simple question broke something open inside Victoria. She told Carol everything, the lawsuit, the fight with Daniel, the overwhelming certainty that she was going to lose everything. Carol listened without interrupting, and when Victoria finally ran out of words, she said, Can I tell you something? Sure. Grief makes us do stupid things. It makes us push away the people who love us because we're so afraid of losing them that we'd rather lose them on our own terms. But here's the thing, you can't control loss, you can't prevent it. The only thing you can control is how you show up for the people who are still here. Victoria closed her eyes. I don't know how to show up. I've spent so long protecting myself that I don't know how to be vulnerable. Then start small. Call Daniel. Tell him you're scared. Tell him you need help. That's all vulnerability is, asking for what you need and trusting that the other person will give it to you. What if he says no? Then at least you'll know. But what if he says yes? Victoria sat with that for a long time after they hung up. Then she picked up her phone and called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. Victoria? I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I'm sorry for being so scared that I hurt you. I'm sorry for... Stop, Daniel said gently. I don't need an apology. I need to know if you're okay. I'm not okay, I'm really not okay, but I want to be, and I can't do it alone. You don't have to, Daniel said. I'm here. I've always been here. I know, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. There was a pause. Can I come over? Please. 20 minutes later, Daniel was at her door. When she opened it, he didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, and Victoria felt something inside her finally begin to heal. They stayed like that for a long time, Victoria's face pressed against Daniel's chest, his arms solid and warm around her. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red and swollen, but something had shifted in her expression, less guarded, more open. Come sit, Daniel said, guiding her to the couch. Tell me about the lawsuit, all of it. So she did. She walked him through every detail. The cousin she'd never met who'd crawled out of the woodwork claiming her parents had promised him a portion of the estate. The lawyer's warning that the case would drag her through depositions and court appearances. The very real possibility that she'd have to testify about the night of the fire in front of strangers. They're going to make it sound like I'm some opportunist who benefited from my parents' death, Victoria said, her voice hollow. Like I wanted this. The money, the company, any of it. Anyone who knows you would know that's garbage, Daniel said. But they don't know me. The judge won't know me. The jury won't know me. All they'll see is a rich woman fighting to keep money from a family member. Then we make sure they see the truth. Victoria shook her head. It's not that simple. My lawyer says these cases get ugly. They'll dig into everything. My relationship with my parents, my mental health history, the fire investigation. They'll twist every fact to fit their narrative. How much is this cousin asking for? 15 million? Daniel whistled low. That's not pocket change. It's nothing compared to what I inherited. But it's the principle. My parents worked their entire lives to build that company. They wanted me to have it, to continue their legacy. And now some stranger who never bothered to visit, who didn't even come to their funeral, wants a piece of it because we share DNA? The anger in her voice surprised both of them. Victoria wasn't used to feeling anything but grief and guilt when it came to her parents. But this felt different. This felt like she was finally allowed to be angry. Fight it, Daniel said. Don't let him win. What if I lose? Then you lose. But at least you didn't give up without trying. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something click into place. You're right. I've spent so long being afraid of everything that I forgot I could fight back. So fight. I will. She took a shaky breath. But I need your help. Anything. I need you to come to the depositions with me. I know that's asking a lot, and I know you have work and Emma, but I can't do this alone. Daniel didn't hesitate. I'll be there. What about Emma? Marcus can watch her, or I'll bring her along and she can draw in the waiting room. We'll figure it out. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. Why are you so good to me? Because you'd do the same for me. Would I? Yeah, you would. Daniel squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you think, Victoria. You've survived things that would break most people. This lawsuit? It's just another fire. And you've already proven you know how to survive those. The metaphor was clumsy, maybe even insensitive, but it landed exactly right. Victoria laughed despite herself, a wet, shaky sound. That's a terrible comparison, she said. I know, but it's true. The first deposition was scheduled for the following Thursday. Victoria spent the days leading up to it in a constant state of anxiety, barely eating, barely sleeping. Daniel stayed with her most nights, talking her through panic attacks, holding her when the nightmares came. Emma noticed something was wrong. Is Victoria sick? She asked Daniel one morning while he was making her lunch. Not sick exactly, just going through something hard. Can I help? Daniel smiled. Actually, yeah. You know that drawing you made of the princess fighting the dragon? Yeah? Do you think you could make one for Victoria? I think she could use a reminder that princesses can fight their own battles. Emma's face lit up. I'll make her the best drawing ever. That afternoon, Emma presented Victoria with a crayon masterpiece, a princess with wild hair and a fierce expression, standing on top of a defeated dragon, a crown slightly crooked on her head. You're the princess, Emma explained. And the dragon is whatever's making you sad. Victoria stared at the drawing, something warm and painful blooming in her chest. It's perfect, Emma. Thank you. Dad says you're really brave, even braver than the princess. Your dad's being generous. Nuh-uh. Dad doesn't lie. He says lying is for people who are scared of the truth. Victoria glanced at Daniel, who shrugged. She remembers everything I say. It's terrifying. You should put it on your wall, Emma said, pointing at the drawing. So when you're scared, you can remember you're brave. Victoria carefully folded the drawing and put it in her purse. I'll keep it with me, always. The morning of the deposition arrived too fast. Victoria dressed in a charcoal suit, her armor back in place, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely button her shirt. Daniel helped her, his touch gentle and steady. You've got this, he said. What if I fall apart in there? Then you fall apart, but you get back up and keep going. They drove to the lawyer's office in silence, Victoria staring out the window, trying to control her breathing. Daniel's hand found hers, and she held on like he was the only thing keeping her anchored. The deposition room was exactly as awful as she'd imagined. Cold, sterile, filled with strangers in expensive suits who looked at her like she was a puzzle to be solved. Her cousin Robert was there too, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and a smug expression that made Victoria's skin crawl. Daniel wasn't allowed in the room, but he waited right outside, and knowing he was there made all the difference. The questions started simple. Her name, her age, her relationship to the deceased, but they quickly turned invasive. Can you describe your relationship with your parents in the months leading up to their death? It was good. Normal. Normal how? We had dinner together most nights. They asked about school. I asked about their work. It was fine. Just fine? Victoria's lawyer interjected. What's the relevance of this line of questioning? Robert's lawyer smiled thinly. We're trying to establish whether Ms. Hale had motive to benefit from her parents' untimely death. The room went silent. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. That's outrageous, her lawyer said. My client was 16 years old and nearly died in that fire. The implication that she had anything to do with... We're not implying anything, Robert's lawyer said smoothly. We're simply trying to understand the family dynamics. I love my parents, Victoria said, her voice shaking with fury. I would have died for them. I almost did die. So if you're suggesting, Ms. Hale, please answer the question. Would you describe your relationship with your parents as close? Yes. No conflicts? No arguments about inheritance or the family business? I was 16. I didn't care about the business. I cared about passing my algebra test and getting into college. But you did inherit the business. A business worth over $200 million at the time of your parents' death. Because they died, not because I wanted them to. The questions went on for hours, each one more invasive than the last. They asked about her mental health, her therapy, her nightmares. They asked about the fire itself, forcing her to relive every excruciating detail. They asked about the insurance payout, the inheritance, how she'd spent the money. By the time it was over, Victoria felt like she'd been flayed open and put on display. She walked out of that room barely holding it together, and the second she saw Daniel, she collapsed into his arms. I can't do this again, she sobbed. I can't go through this again. You won't have to. That was the worst of it. They made it sound like I wanted them to die, like I planned it. Nobody believes that. Robert does. His lawyer does. Robert's a leech who's trying to profit off tragedy. His opinion doesn't matter. Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. What if the judge believes him? What if they think I'm some manipulative monster who killed her own parents? The fire investigation cleared you. There's no evidence of foul play. This is just a desperate attempt to rattle you. Well, it worked. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. You are the strongest person I know. You survived that fire. You built a life from nothing. You help kids who have nobody else. You are not a monster, Victoria. You're a survivor. She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe him, but the doubt had taken root, and she couldn't shake it. The days that followed were brutal. Robert's legal team filed motion after motion, each one designed to drag out the case and wear Victoria down. Her lawyer assured her they were winning, that Robert had no real case, but it didn't feel like winning. Victoria stopped eating, stopped sleeping properly. The nightmares came back with a vengeance, worse than ever before. She started having panic attacks in public. Once in the grocery store, once during a meeting with her board of directors. Daniel was there for all of it, but Victoria could see the toll it was taking on him too. He was exhausted, running between work and Emma and her, and she hated herself for being such a burden. You should take a break from me, she said one night. They were in her penthouse, the city lights glittering below, and Victoria felt like she was suffocating. What? From this. From me. It's too much. I'm too much. Daniel set down the coffee he'd been drinking. Where's this coming from? I'm ruining your life. You're barely seeing Emma. You're exhausted. You deserve better than this. Stop telling me what I deserve. I'm serious, Daniel. You can't keep sacrificing everything for me. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm choosing to be here. Why? Victoria's voice broke. Why do you keep choosing me when I'm such a disaster? Because I love you. How many times do I have to say it before you believe me? I do believe you. I just don't understand why. Daniel stood up, crossing the room to stand in front of her. You want to know why? Because you're real. Because you don't hide who you are, even when it hurts. Because you fight for the people you care about. Because when Emma drew you that picture, you cried. And you kept it with you like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because you're broken and beautiful and brave, and I'd rather be with you on your worst day than with anyone else on their best. Victoria stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to be loved like this. Then let me teach you. She kissed him then, desperate and clinging, and Daniel kissed her back like he was trying to pour every ounce of certainty he had into her. When they broke apart, Victoria was shaking. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. What if I can't do this? What if I fall apart completely? Then I'll help you put yourself back together, as many times as it takes. That's not fair to you? Let me decide what's fair to me. Victoria rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heartbeat. Okay. 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 I'll stop trying to push you away. I'll let you help. Daniel kissed the top of her head. That's all I'm asking. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Victoria's lawyer called with news. Robert's legal team had made a critical error in their filings, one that basically gutted their entire case. The judge had granted a summary judgment in Victoria's favor. The lawsuit was over. Victoria hung up the phone and just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to process what she'd just heard. It was over. She called Daniel immediately. It's done, she said when he answered. The lawsuit. It's over. We won. Victoria, that's amazing. I don't know what to feel. I thought I'd be relieved, but I just feel empty. That's normal. You've been living in fight or flight mode for weeks. Your body doesn't know how to relax yet. Can you come over? I'm on my way. When Daniel arrived, Victoria was sitting on her balcony, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. He sat down next to her and they watched the city in silence for a while. It doesn't feel real, Victoria said finally. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. There is no other shoe. It's over. What do I do now? Whatever you want. Victoria turned to look at him. I don't know what I want. I've spent so long just trying to survive that I forgot there's supposed to be more than that. Then maybe it's time to figure it out. How? Daniel smiled. Start small. What's one thing you've always wanted to do but never let yourself? Victoria thought about it. Travel. My parents always talked about taking me to Europe after I graduated high school. We never got the chance. So go. Alone? Or not alone? Daniel's eyes were warm. I've got some vacation days saved up, and Emma's never been on a plane. Victoria's breath caught. You'd do that? Come with me? If you want us to. I do. I really do. They started planning that night, spread out on Victoria's living room floor with her laptop, looking at flights and hotels and all the places Victoria's parents had dreamed of visiting. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Emma would lose her mind over the Eiffel Tower. For the first time in months, Victoria felt something that wasn't fear or grief or exhaustion. She felt hope. But hope was fragile, and Victoria learned that the hard way. 3 days before they were supposed to leave for Europe, Victoria had the worst panic attack she'd had in years. She was at the community center talking to Carol about the trip when suddenly she couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, her vision tunneling, and she was back in the fire, trapped, burning, dying. Carol called Daniel, who arrived within minutes. He found Victoria curled up on the floor of Carol's office, hyperventilating, unable to speak. I've got you, Daniel said, kneeling beside her. Breathe with me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It took 20 minutes for Victoria to calm down enough to talk. I can't go, she gasped. I can't get on that plane. Why not? Because what if something happens? What if the plane crashes? What if there's a fire? What if I lose you and Emma the same way I lost my parents? Daniel's expression softened. Victoria, that's the anxiety talking. What if it's not? What if I'm right? Then we'll deal with it. But you can't live your life waiting for disaster. That's not living. That's just existing. I don't know how to stop. Yes, you do. You've been fighting this fear for months. You've been showing up, doing the work, trying to heal. Don't let one panic attack undo all of that. Victoria looked at him through tear-blurred eyes. What if I can't do it? Then we don't go. But I think you can. I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. Carol, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. Victoria, can I share something with you? Victoria nodded. After my husband died, I was terrified of everything. I wouldn't drive on the highway because that's where he had his heart attack. I wouldn't go to restaurants we used to visit. I basically built a prison out of my own fear. Carol sat down across from them. And then one day my daughter asked me if I was going to spend the rest of my life being afraid. And I realized that's exactly what I was doing. I was so scared of losing anything else that I'd already lost everything that mattered. How did you stop? Victoria asked. I didn't stop being afraid. I just started doing things anyway, scared. That's the secret nobody tells you. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing it anyway. Victoria sat with that for a long time. Then she looked at Daniel. If I have another panic attack on the plane, will you be there? Every second. And if I freak out in Paris, I'll freak out with you? Victoria laughed despite herself. That's not helpful. Sure it is. Misery loves company. She took a deep breath, then another. Okay, let's do it. Let's go to Paris. The night before the flight, Victoria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with every worst-case scenario. Finally, she gave up and called Daniel. Can't sleep? He asked, his voice rough with sleep. No? You? I was sleeping just fine until my phone rang. Sorry. Don't be. What's on your mind? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. Victoria paused. What if this is a mistake? What if it's not? That's not an answer. Sure it is. You're so focused on what could go wrong that you're not even considering what could go right. Like what? Like Emma seeing the Eiffel Tower for the first time. Like eating real French pastries. Like you getting to do something your parents always wanted you to do. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I wish they could be there. Me too. Do you think they'd be proud of me for trying? I think they'd be proud of you no matter what. But yeah, I think they'd be especially proud of you for this. Victoria wiped her eyes. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria. How many times do I have to say it before you believe me? At least a few thousand more. Daniel laughed. I can do that. They talked until the sun came up, about nothing and everything. And when Victoria finally hung up, she felt steady enough to face whatever came next. The airport was chaos, crowds and noise and bright lights that made Victoria's skin crawl. But Daniel kept a steady hand on the small of her back, and Emma chattered nonstop about all the things she wanted to see. And somehow Victoria made it through security without losing her mind. On the plane, wedged between Daniel and the window, Victoria gripped the armrests as they taxied down the runway. You okay? Daniel asked. Ask me when we're in the air. The plane lifted off, and Victoria's stomach dropped. She closed her eyes, focusing on breathing, on Daniel's hand covering hers, on Emma's excited squeals as they climbed higher. And then they were above the clouds, the world falling away below them, and Victoria opened her eyes and saw nothing but blue sky and sunlight. We did it, she whispered. Yeah, Daniel said, smiling. We did. Emma pressed her face against the window. It's so pretty. Dad, look, we're flying. Daniel caught Victoria's eye and they both laughed. And for the first time in 16 years, Victoria felt like maybe, just maybe, she was finally moving forward instead of just surviving. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. Paris was everything Victoria's parents had promised it would be, and nothing like she'd imagined. The city sprawled beneath them as their taxi wound through narrow streets, Emma's face pressed against the window, her running commentary a steady stream of wonder. Daniel sat beside Victoria, their fingers intertwined, and every so often he'd squeeze her hand like he was checking to make sure she was still there, still present, still breathing. Look, Dad, that building is like 1,000,000 years old. Not quite 1,000,000, Daniel said, but he was smiling. Victoria watched them, this man and his daughter who'd somehow become her anchor, and felt something loosen in her chest. The panic that had gripped her at the airport had faded to a low hum, manageable, almost ignorable. Their hotel was small, tucked away on a side street in the Marais district. The woman at the front desk spoke in rapid French, switching to heavily accented English when she realized they were American. Emma was enchanted by everything: the tiny elevator, the wrought iron balcony, the view of red rooftops and chimneys. Can we go see the tower now? Emma asked, bouncing on the bed. Tomorrow, Daniel said. It's late, and we need to adjust to the time difference. But I'm not tired. You will be in about 20 minutes. He was right. By the time they'd ordered room service, croissants and hot chocolate that Emma declared the best thing she'd ever tasted, she was nodding off, curled against Daniel's side. Victoria stood on the balcony, looking out at the city, trying to process the fact that she was here, that she'd actually gotten on a plane and flown across an ocean without falling apart completely. Daniel joined her after he'd tucked Emma into bed. How are you holding up? He asked. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. Fair enough. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Victoria leaned back into him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. My parents stood on a balcony like this once, she said quietly, in their honeymoon photos. They looked so happy. I bet they'd be happy you're here now. Or disappointed it took me 16 years to get here. Victoria. She turned to face him. I know. I'm being too hard on myself. It's a habit. When we're going to break. We? Yeah, we. You're not doing this alone anymore, remember? She kissed him, slow and deliberate, and when they pulled apart, her eyes were wet. I love you, she said. I don't think I've actually said it out loud yet. You haven't. Well, I do. Love you. Even though you're stubborn and you refuse to let me sabotage myself and you make terrible jokes when I'm having a panic attack. Daniel grinned. Those are all my best qualities. I know. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, the city humming below them, and Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The next morning, Emma dragged them out of bed at dawn, insisting they couldn't waste a single second of Paris. They ate breakfast at a cafe down the street, more croissants, strong coffee for the adults, pain au chocolat for Emma, and then set off toward the Eiffel Tower. Emma's reaction when she finally saw it made the entire trip worth it. She stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk, her mouth falling open, her eyes wide. It's huge, she breathed. Yeah, it is, Daniel said, crouching down beside her. Want to go up? We can go up. All the way to the top. Emma shrieked and took off running, Daniel jogging after her, laughing. Victoria followed more slowly, her phone out, capturing the moment. She'd take this memory back with her, hold on to it on the hard days. The view from the top was dizzying. Emma pressed against the railing, pointing out landmarks she'd memorized from the guidebook Daniel had bought her. Victoria stood back, gripping the metal barrier, fighting the urge to retreat to the center where it felt safer. You okay? Daniel asked, appearing at her elbow. Heights aren't really my thing. You made it this far. You can make it a few more minutes. Victoria forced herself to look out at the city, at the Seine winding through it like a silver ribbon, at the buildings and bridges and endless sky. Her heart was hammering, her palms sweating, but she stayed. I'm proud of you, Daniel said quietly. For not passing out? For being here, for trying. Victoria looked at him, at this man who'd seen her at her worst and hadn't run, and felt her throat tighten. I couldn't have done this without you. Yeah, you could have. You're stronger than you think. I'm really not. Then we'll agree to disagree. They spent the rest of the day wandering through the Louvre, where Emma declared the Mona Lisa smaller than I thought, along the Champs-Élysées, where Victoria bought her a stuffed Eiffel Tower that she refused to put down. By evening, they were all exhausted, feet aching, but Emma insisted they had to have real French dinner. They found a small bistro tucked away on a quiet street, the kind of place tourists usually missed. The waiter was charmed by Emma's attempts at French. She'd been practicing merci and s'il vous plaît all day, and brought her extra bread without being asked. This is the best day ever, Emma announced, tomato sauce smeared on her chin. Yeah, Daniel said. Better than your birthday? Way better. We're in Paris. Victoria watched them, this little family that had somehow become hers, and felt something crack open inside her. Not the painful breaking she was used to, but something gentler, like a door opening, letting light in. Thank you, she said to Daniel later, after Emma had fallen asleep in her chair and they'd moved her to the bench seat, her head in Victoria's lap. For what? For this. For her. For making me believe I could have something good. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. You deserve good things, Victoria. You always have. I'm starting to believe that, finally. They stayed in Paris for 5 days, cramming in as much as they could. Notre Dame, Sacré-Cœur, a boat ride on the Seine that made Emma giggle every time they went under a bridge. Victoria had moments of panic, moments where the crowds or the noise or her own thoughts became too much. But Daniel was always there, steady and patient, talking her through it. On their last night, after Emma was asleep, Victoria and Daniel sat on the hotel balcony with cheap wine from the corner store, watching the city lights. "I don't want to go back," Victoria admitted. "To the States? To real life. To all the responsibilities and the pressure and the constant feeling that I'm one bad day away from falling apart." "You won't fall apart." "How do you know?" "Because you're not the same person you were when we met. You've done the work. You've faced your demons. That doesn't just disappear." Victoria swirled the wine in her glass. "What if it does? What if I get home and everything goes back to the way it was?" "Then we deal with it, together." "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." Daniel set down his glass. "Victoria, I need you to understand something. I'm not going anywhere. Not when things get hard, not when you have a bad day, not when you wake up screaming. I'm here. For as long as you'll have me." Victoria felt tears slide down her cheeks. "What if forever isn't long enough?" Daniel smiled. "Then we'll figure out what comes after forever." She kissed him then, tasting wine and promises, and when they pulled apart, she said, "I want to marry you." Daniel blinked. "What?" "I want to marry you. Not now, not tomorrow, but someday. I want Emma to be my daughter. I want us to be a family. A real family." "Victoria, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I've spent 16 years being afraid to want anything, and I'm tired of it. I want this. I want you." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria's heart sank. She'd said too much, pushed too hard, scared him away. But then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Yes," he said into her hair. "Yes to all of it, whenever you're ready." Victoria pulled back, searching his face. "You mean it?" "Every word." They stayed up talking until the sun rose, making plans and promises, building a future out of hope and determination and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. The flight home was easier than the flight there. Emma slept most of the way, curled up under an airplane blanket, and Victoria managed to doze off against Daniel's shoulder, her hand clasped in his. When they landed, Marcus was waiting at the airport, grinning like an idiot. "Well," he said as Emma ran into his arms, "how was Paris?" "Amazing," Emma said. "We went up the Eiffel Tower and ate snails and saw old paintings, and Victoria said, 'We're going to be a family.'" Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Did she now?" Daniel looked at Victoria, who shrugged. "Cat's out of the bag." "About damn time," Marcus said, pulling them both into a hug. "I told you that blind date was a good idea." "You're insufferable," Daniel said, but he was smiling. "I'm a genius. There's a difference." The next few months were a blur of motion. Victoria threw herself into work, but differently this time. She delegated more, trusted her team, stopped trying to control every detail. She kept going to the grief support group, started seeing a new therapist who actually seemed to understand her. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they became less frequent, less intense. Some nights she slept through without waking once. Other nights, Daniel was there, talking her down, reminding her she was safe. Emma started calling Victoria V, short for Victoria, and then one day it became Mom V, and Victoria cried for an hour. "Is that okay?" Emma asked, worried. "I can call you something else if you want." "No," Victoria managed through her tears. "It's perfect." They moved in together. Daniel and Emma into Victoria's penthouse, which suddenly felt less like a museum and more like a home. Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator, Daniel's work boots cluttered the entryway, and Victoria found herself tripping over dinosaur toys at 3 in the morning and not even minding. The proposal happened on a random Tuesday. They were at the community center, Victoria helping Emma with her homework, while Daniel talked to Carol about expanding the foster care program. It was ordinary, mundane, and perfect. Daniel knelt down in front of Victoria, right there in the middle of the community center, and pulled out a simple ring. "I know we already talked about this," he said, "but I wanted to do it properly. Victoria Hale, will you marry me?" Emma was bouncing up and down. Say yes! Say yes! Victoria looked at Daniel, at this man who'd seen her at her absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway, and felt her heart swell. Yes, she said. Always yes. The wedding was small, just Marcus and Carol and a handful of people from the grief support group. Emma was the flower girl, and she took the job so seriously that she counted out each petal she dropped, whispering numbers under her breath. Victoria wore a simple dress, cream-colored, long sleeves to cover the scars she was still learning to accept. Daniel wore a suit he'd rented, looking uncomfortable and handsome and perfect. When it came time for the vows, Daniel went first. "I'm not good with words," he said, his voice rough, "but I'll try. Victoria, you came into my life when I'd given up on finding anything real. You were scared and broken and convinced you weren't worth loving. And somehow, you taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless, that scars, visible or not, are just proof we survived. I promise to stand by you on the hard days. I promise to remind you you're strong when you forget. I promise to love you and Emma with everything I have for as long as I live." Victoria was crying before he finished. When it was her turn, she took a shaky breath. "I spent 16 years believing I didn't deserve happiness," she said, "that I should have died in that fire with my parents, that survival was a punishment, not a gift. And then I met you, and you refused to let me hide. You saw all my broken pieces and didn't try to fix them. You just loved me anyway. Daniel, you gave me a reason to stop surviving and start living. You and Emma are my family, my home, my second chance. I promise to keep fighting, for us, for this life we're building, for the future I never thought I'd have." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The reception was held at the community center because Victoria insisted. The kids she'd been helping for years decorated the space with handmade banners and drawings. Emma gave a speech that was mostly about dinosaurs, but ended with, "I'm really glad Victoria's my mom now." Marcus got drunk and told embarrassing stories about Daniel's failed attempts at dating before Victoria. Carol cried through her entire toast, and Victoria and Daniel danced in the center of the room, surrounded by people who'd become family and felt whole. Later, after everyone had left and Emma was asleep at Marcus's house, Victoria and Daniel stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out at the city. "We did it," Victoria said. "Yeah, we did. I never thought I'd have this. A husband, a daughter, a life that doesn't feel like I'm just going through the motions." Daniel pulled her close. "You deserve all of it. I'm starting to believe that." They stood there in comfortable silence, and Victoria thought about her parents, about the life they'd wanted for her. She'd never know if this was what they'd imagined, but she thought they'd be proud. Not because she'd inherited their company or made millions or built a successful career, but because she'd survived. Because she'd chosen to live, really live, despite the pain. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked. "That maybe surviving isn't a punishment after all. Maybe it's a gift. And it took me 16 years and a stubborn construction worker to figure that out." Daniel laughed. "I prefer determined. Stubborn. Determined. Agree to disagree?" "Always." Victoria turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "I love you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life being grateful you didn't run when I gave you every reason to. I love you too. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life reminding you that you're worth staying for." They kissed as the city lights glittered below them, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. Not because they'd fixed each other, you can't fix people, and Victoria had learned that the hard way, but because they'd chosen each other, scars and all. The next morning, Victoria woke up to find Emma already in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes with Daniel's supervision. The kitchen was a disaster. Flour everywhere, batter on the ceiling, Emma covered in syrup. But they were laughing, and the sound filled the entire apartment. "Morning, Mom V," Emma said, grinning. And just like that, Victoria knew she was home. 6 months later, Victoria stood in front of the grief support group, preparing to share something she'd been working on for weeks. "I've been coming to this group for over a year now," she said, her voice steady. "And I've learned a lot about grief, about how it doesn't have a timeline, how it changes, but never really goes away, how it can coexist with joy. But the biggest thing I've learned is that surviving isn't the same as living." She looked around the room at the faces of people who'd become friends, who'd held space for her pain when she couldn't hold it herself. For 16 years, I survived. I built a successful company, made money, helped people, but I wasn't living. I was just existing, waiting for the next disaster, convinced I didn't deserve anything good. And then I met someone who refused to accept that version of me, who saw past the scars and the fear and the guilt and loved me anyway. Victoria's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that love fixes everything, because it doesn't. I still have nightmares. I still have days where I can't get out of bed. I still carry the weight of my parents' death. But I also have a husband now, a daughter, a life that feels worth living. And I think that's what my parents would have wanted for me. Not perfection, not constant happiness, just the courage to keep going, even when it's hard. Patricia, the woman who'd told Victoria that grief gets easier, not better, was crying. So was Carol. Half the room was in tears. So if you're sitting here thinking you don't deserve to move forward, that you should have died instead of them, that survival is a punishment. I get it. I've been there. But I'm asking you to consider the possibility that maybe you survived for a reason. Maybe you're meant to do something with this second chance. Maybe your story isn't over yet. After the meeting, Patricia hugged her tight. That was beautiful, she said. It was terrifying, Victoria admitted. The best things usually are. Victoria drove home that night with a sense of peace she'd never experienced before. Not the absence of pain, she'd carry that pain for the rest of her life, but the presence of something stronger. Hope, love, purpose. When she walked into the apartment, Daniel and Emma were building a blanket fort in the living room, and they both looked up with matching grins. Come help, Emma demanded. We're making a castle. Victoria dropped her bag and crawled into the fort, letting Emma direct the placement of pillows and Daniel's terrible architectural suggestions. They ended up with a lopsided structure that collapsed twice, but when they finally got it stable, they sat inside, flashlight casting shadows on the blanket walls, and Emma told them an elaborate story about a princess who saved herself. And she didn't need a prince, Emma said firmly, because she was brave all by herself. What about friends? Victoria asked. Did she have those? Emma considered this. Yeah, she had friends, and they helped her fight the dragon, but she did the fighting herself. That's a good story, Daniel said. The best, Victoria agreed. Later, after Emma was asleep and they were cleaning up the fort, Daniel caught Victoria's hand. You okay? He asked. You've been quiet since you got home. I'm good. Really good, actually. Yeah? Victoria smiled. Yeah. I was just thinking about how far I've come, how different my life is now compared to a year ago. Different good or different bad? Different good. The best kind of different. Daniel pulled her into his arms and they swayed slightly, dancing to music only they could hear. I'm proud of you, he said, for everything, for fighting, for staying, for choosing this life even when it was hard. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe, but you did it. That's what matters. Victoria rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The terrified 16-year-old who survived a fire, the closed-off billionaire who pushed everyone away, the broken woman who thought she didn't deserve love. All those versions had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life. And maybe that was the point. Maybe you didn't have to be whole to be worthy of love. Maybe being broken was just part of being human. Maybe the scars, visible and invisible, were just proof that you'd lived, that you'd survived, that you'd kept going even when every part of you wanted to give up. I love you, Victoria said. I love you too. And standing there in the ruins of a blanket fort, in an apartment that finally felt like home, Victoria realized something profound. She wasn't healed. She probably never would be, not completely, but she was healing, and that was enough. The nightmares still came sometimes. The panic attacks still hit without warning. The grief still rose up and threatened to drown her. But she had tools now, support, people who loved her unconditionally. She had Daniel, who stayed through every storm. She had Emma, who reminded her every day that life could be simple and joyful and good. She had Carol and Patricia and the grief group who held space for her pain without trying to fix it. She had a life worth fighting for. And some days, that was more than enough. Some days, it was everything. Years later, Victoria would look back on this moment as the turning point. Not the moment she met Daniel, not the moment they got married, but this quiet Tuesday night in a messy apartment with a collapsed blanket fort and a sleeping child down the hall. This was the moment she finally understood that love wasn't about being perfect or whole or healed. It was about showing up, broken pieces and all, and trusting that someone would love you anyway. It was about choosing to live instead of just survive. It was about second chances and the courage to take them. And as Victoria stood there in Daniel's arms, listening to the city hum beyond the windows, she made a silent promise to her parents, to herself, to the terrified 16-year-old who'd crawled out of that burning house convinced she should have died. She promised to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep choosing this messy, imperfect, beautiful life. Because she'd survived for a reason, and she was finally ready to find out what that reason was. Sonnet 4.5.